Alice sat in the last row, her notebook filled with quiet doodles rather than shining grades. She blended into the walls, invisible to her teachers, forgettable to her classmates. Yet beside her, Daniel held her hand under the desk, both unaware that this silent girl would rewrite her destiny forever. Daniel wasn't the boy everyone admired in school. He didn't have flashy sneakers or the charm that made girls giggle in the hallways. Like Alice, he lived in the background, unnoticed by the crowd. And maybe that's why they found each other, two quiet souls bound by simplicity. After exams, they'd walk side by side on empty streets, sharing cheap snacks and whispering about futures that felt so far away. Their love didn't shine in grand gestures, but in small, fragile moments. A shared umbrella in the rain, a note slipped under a desk, the warmth of a hand held too long. To them, those moments were everything. Daniel often told Alice, "We don't need the world to see us. Ordinary is enough." She smiled, believing it then. But somewhere inside, a part of her wondered, what if her life wasn't meant to stay ordinary forever? Alice moved through her school years like a shadow in daylight. She was never called first in class, never picked as the leader, never celebrated in assemblies. Her marks were enough to pass, never enough to be remembered. Sometimes she felt invisible, like her life was written in faint pencil lines that could easily be erased. Teachers praised others, the loud, the bright, the daring, but her name rarely left their lips. In those moments of quiet disappointment, Daniel became her comfort. He'd squeeze her hand and whisper, "It's okay, Alice, we don't have to chase the spotlight. Ordinary is safe." She wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that being unnoticed was enough. Yet each time he said those words, a restlessness stirred inside her chest. Why did ordinary sound like a cage? Why did his comfort feel more like surrender? She didn't argue, but deep down Alice wondered if safety was the same as living. One afternoon during a group project, Alice finally let slip the dream she had been hiding for so long. Her voice trembled, but her eyes carried a rare spark. "One day I want to build something of my own. Maybe a business, maybe something big enough that people remember my name." For a second, the room fell silent. Then the laughter came, a sharp, cruel, and endless. Her classmates couldn't imagine the quiet girl in the back row running anything more than errands. Alice tried to smile through it, but inside her heart sank. And then came the moment that cut deeper than all the mockery. Daniel, the boy she trusted, the one who held her dreams late at night, simply smiled and whispered, "Alice, maybe just focus on reality. Not everyone is meant to do something extraordinary." His words stung more than the laughter, because they weren't cruel, they were sincere. He believed it. He believed she wasn't capable. That night, Alice lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing her biggest battle wasn't against the world's laughter, but against the quiet disbelief of the one person she loved most. Alice had poured everything into that scholarship application. Late nights spent scribbling essays, endless edits, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, it would be her ticket out of ordinary. She imagined the letter opening a door, giving her proof that she could be more than invisible. But when the results came, her name wasn't on the list. The rejection hit like a silent storm. No cruel words, no mocking laughter this time, just absence. An empty space where her dream was supposed to be. She hid in the quiet corner of the school library, her face buried in her arms as tears slipped onto the pages of an unopened book. Daniel found her there. He sat beside her, held her trembling hand, and whispered gently, "Maybe it's time to stop chasing these unrealistic things. Alice, you don't need to prove anything." But his comfort only deepened the wound. To him, her dream was a fantasy. To her, it was oxygen. Sitting in that dim library light, Alice felt something shift inside her. If even love couldn't believe in her, then she would have to believe in herself, no matter how much it hurt. The words weren't meant for her ears. Alice had gone to find Daniel after class, following the sound of his laughter echoing down the hallway. She stopped just outside the door when she heard it, his voice casual, teasing. "Alice is sweet, but she's not meant for greatness." The friends around him chuckled, brushing it off as harmless talk. But for Alice, it wasn't harmless. It was a blade cutting into the softest part of her heart. She stood frozen, the air heavy, her chest tight. For a moment, she wanted to run, to cry like she had in the library. But something inside her refused. It wasn't anger that rose within her. It was fire. A fire that whispered, "Prove him wrong." She didn't storm in. She didn't confront him. She simply walked away, her silence louder than any scream. That night, as the city slept, Alice sat at her desk under a dim bulb, staring at a blank page. His words replayed in her head, but each repetition didn't break her. It built her resolve. If Daniel believed she wasn't meant for greatness, then greatness would be the only answer she'd ever give. Alice's first step wasn't glamorous. It was wiping tables in a small cafe that smelled of burnt coffee and fresh bread. She worked nights long after her classmates had gone home, trading sleep for the sound of clinking cups and the rhythm of a cash register. But to Alice, this wasn't just work. It was a classroom. She studied how customers ordered, how the manager handled complaints, how profit hid in the tiniest details. Daniel would drop by sometimes, his smile tired, his tone dismissive. "It's just a phase, Alice. You'll get bored soon." But when he looked into her eyes, he saw something unfamiliar, a fire that hadn't been there before. She no longer carried the gaze of a girl waiting for permission to dream. She was teaching herself how the world worked, one shift at a time. What looked like an ordinary cafe job to others was, for Alice, the first brick in the empire she hadn't yet named. Days and nights began to blur for Alice. Mornings belonged to lectures she barely absorbed, afternoons to assignments she rushed through, and evenings to the cafe where she still scrubbed counters and saved every coin. But when the world finally fell silent at midnight, that's when her true work began. She sat hunched over an old laptop, its screen flickering as she designed her first online store. She scrolled through suppliers, calculated margins, taught herself coding from scraps of online forums. Her fingers shook with fatigue, eyes stung from sleepless nights, but inside her grew a quiet certainty. This was worth it. Daniel noticed the change. Their late-night walks had stopped, their whispered dreams replaced by Alice's constant tapping on the keyboard. He would sigh and say, "Alice, you're losing yourself in this. Can't you see how unrealistic it is?" His words, once a comfort, now felt like chains pulling her backward. Every sleepless night widened the gap between them. But for Alice, exhaustion became her badge, sacrifice her weapon. She was no longer chasing approval. She was building a life no one else could yet see. It happened on a rainy night when the cafe shift had drained her and the glow of her laptop was the only light in the room. Alice refreshed her dashboard for what felt like the 100th time, expecting the usual emptiness. But then, there it was. A notification. One order. Just one, her breath caught. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding faster than it ever had during exams or speeches. Someone out there, a stranger, had chosen her. Her product, her idea. It wasn't about the money, it was about proof. Proof that she wasn't invisible anymore. She jumped up, tears blurring her vision, spinning in that cramped room as if the world had shifted. Every cruel laugh in class, every whispered, "Be realistic." Every rejection she had swallowed suddenly felt small. This one sale was louder than them all. Daniel, when told, only smiled politely, calling it luck. But Alice didn't need his validation anymore. To her, that single sale wasn't luck. It was the sound of destiny knocking softly at her door. She knew then, if one person could believe in her work, millions more could follow. The distance between them could no longer be ignored. One evening, Daniel finally spoke what had been weighing on him. His voice wasn't angry, just tired, almost pleading. "You're changing, Alice. We used to dream about a small house, quiet nights, a safe life together. Why chase this madness?" Alice listened in silence, her heart torn. She knew he loved her. That much was clear in the way he reached for her hand. But his love came wrapped in fear. Fear of failing, fear of losing, fear of stepping outside the comfort of ordinary. She had once shared that same dream of simplicity, but now every fiber of her being told her she was meant for more. Looking at Daniel, she realized the cruel truth. He wanted to protect her from pain, but in doing so, he was asking her to shrink. Alice didn't argue. She just held his gaze, knowing that love without faith was no longer enough to carry her forward. The night of their final conversation was quiet, almost too quiet. Daniel's words trembled with frustration but also sorrow. "Alice, if you keep chasing this, you'll lose everything, us, your future, your peace." His eyes pleaded for her to choose safety, to choose him. Alice's chest ached as she listened. She loved him, she always had. But deep down she knew, to give up her dream was to give up herself. So with a voice breaking, she whispered the hardest words she'd ever spoken. "I can't stop, Daniel. Not now." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Daniel's face hardened, disappointment clouding the softness that once defined their bond. He turned away, leaving her with nothing but the echo of his fading footsteps. Alice crumbled that night, tears soaking her pillow until dawn. The breakup shattered her heart, yet beneath the grief, she felt something unfamiliar: freedom. She had chosen the path of pain and possibility, and though it cost her love, it gave her back her future. The spotlight felt almost unreal. Years had passed since those nights of exhaustion, since the tears in the library, since Daniel's fading footsteps. Now Alice stood on a stage in front of thousands, her name projected behind her in bold letters, not as a student, not as an ordinary girl, but as the founder of a global brand. Reporters shouted her name. Cameras flashed. Investors leaned forward to hear her story. Yet in her mind, she could still see the quiet girl in the back of the classroom, the one nobody believed in. That forgotten girl had carried every rejection, every heartbreak, and turned it into fuel. Alice didn't just build a company. She built proof. Proof that the unseen can rise, proof that silence can roar louder than doubt. As the applause thundered around her, she realized something profound. It wasn't success that defined her, but the fire she kept alive when nobody else believed. One evening, Daniel sat in his living room, the TV flickering softly in the dark. He wasn't looking for her, but there she was, Alice, standing tall on an international stage, her voice steady, her presence magnetic. The broadcast introduced her as one of the most influential entrepreneurs of her generation. Daniel's breath caught. For a moment he saw the Alice he once knew, the quiet girl with trembling hands and fragile dreams. But now that same girl was commanding the attention of millions. The one he believed was destined for ordinary had become extraordinary before the eyes of the world. Alice, however, felt no bitterness. She didn't build her empire to prove Daniel wrong. She built it to prove herself right. Yet as the applause rolled across the screen, she knew her journey had come full circle. What once was silence, mocked and dismissed, had risen into a roar that no one could ignore. Alice's journey is proof that silence doesn't mean weakness. It's the soil where greatness is born. She began as invisible, doubted even by love, yet rose into a voice the world could not ignore. If her fire touched you, subscribe, because your spark deserves to be heard next.